agreed to, as many as are of that opinion shall say content. To the contrary, not content. The contents have it. We now come to Amendment 17, Lord Moylan.
My Lords, this is a very large and wide-ranging group of amendments, and within it I have a number of amendments myself that span on their own three separate subjects, which I propose to address one after the other in my opening remarks, but then there will be other subjects brought in as the debate continues and other noble lords speak to their own amendments. So if I could split the amendments I'm speaking to into three groups, as I say, the first will be amendments 17 and 18, and these relate to Clause 9 on page 7, where safety duties about illegal content are set out. And what my amendments do, what the first of those two amendments does, is to address the obligation to prevent individuals from encountering priority illegal content by means of the service. Now, earlier this week in committee, I asked my noble friend the Minister if the government understood the words prevent and protect, both of which they use in the legislation, to have different weight. I didn't expect my noble friend to give an answer at that point, but I know that he'll have reflected on it. And at some point we need clarity about this, because courts will actually be looking at listening to and reading what the government says at the dispatch box about the weight to be given to these words. To my mind, to prevent something from happening requires active measures in advance that ensure, as far as reasonably and humanly possible, that it doesn't actually happen. But to protect someone from something happening, one could be talking about something more reactive. And this is a distinction of great importance to media, to internet companies. I'm not talking about the big platforms, but internet companies which are being placed, as I say repeatedly, under very heavy burdens by this bill, and where it is possible that they simply will not be able to discharge them and will have to go out of business. So if we take Wikipedia, which has been mentioned earlier in committee, which operates in 300 languages but employs 700 moderators globally to check what is happening, if they are required by Section 9 to prevent individuals from encountering priority illegal content by means of the service, then they are going to have to scrutinise what is put up on this community-driven website as it appears or before it appears. Now, quite clearly, when you think about something like Welsh Wikipedia, and there is Wikipedia in Welsh, when you think about something like Welsh Wikipedia, it simply wouldn't get off the ground if it had to meet that standard, because the number of people who'd have to be employed to do that would be far more than the service could sustain. Whereas if you had something closer to the wording I'm suggesting in the amendment, where you had to take steps to protect people so that you could react to something and take it down when you become aware of it, then it all becomes a great deal more tolerable. And similarly, Amendment 18 addresses in the same clause, subclause 3, where there's a duty to operate a service using proportionate systems and processes to minimise the length of time. Now, how do you know whether you're minimising the length of time? How is that to be judged? What is the standard by which that is to be measured? And wouldn't it be a great deal better and more achievable if the wording I propose, which is that you simply are under an obligation to take it down, were inserted? So that's my first group, and I put that to my noble friend, and I say all these amendments are probing to some extent at this stage, and I would like to hear how my noble friend really thinks this is going to be something that can actually be operated. Now, my second group of amendments, as a group it's quite small because it contains only one, is Amendment 135. Here I'm grateful to the charity Justice for help in drawing attention to this. Now, this deals with the schedule, and I think it's Schedule 7. On page 202, where the priority offences are set out. And in paragraph 4 of this schedule, an offence is a priority offence includes any of the following provisions, an offence under any of the following provisions of the Public Order Act 1986. And one of those is Section 5, harassment, alarm and distress. Now, here I make a very different point. Here I return to territory which I've been familiar with in the past, which in fact we have been debating only yesterday in Grand Committee, though I personally was not able to be there, which is the whole territory of hate crime and harmful and upsetting words, and how they are to be judged and dealt with. And what my amendment does in this case is to remove Section 5 of the Public Order Act from the list of priority offences, because I simply don't believe that society, if we have enough problems tolerating the police going round telling us when we've done harmful and said harmful and hurtful things and upbraiding us for it, is it really going to be possible to consider, without the widest form of censorship, that it's appropriate for internet platforms to be judging us on that and to be shutting down our communications on the basis of their judgment of what we should be allowed to say? We already know that there's widespread suspicion that some of the internet platforms are too quick to close down, for example, gender-critical speech. What we seem to be doing here is actually giving them something close to a legislative mandate to be very trigger-happy when it comes to closing down speech, because they will say it engages Section 5 of the Public Order Act, or could engage it. I'll come to the question of how they judge it in my third group in a moment, but the noble Lord might be able to help me.
To reinforce Lord Moylan's point on that, I certainly had experience where the police themselves become the complainant, and they would say, for example, they would request that you take down an English Defence League event claiming that it's likely to cause a public order problem. And I have no sympathy whatever with the English Defence League, but I'm very concerned that if it's the police saying you must remove a political demonstration to a platform and citing the legal grounds for doing that. So I think the noble lord is onto a very valid point to be concerned about that.
Noble Lord, I really do wonder if the government realises what it's walking into here. That just with, at the one hand, yesterday, in Grand Committee, the House was debating the new guidance, the statutory instrument, putting in place statutory guidance to the police on how to enforce, much more sensitively than in the past, non-crime hate incidents, while here, the very next day in this chamber, we're putting an obligation on, of all people, a set of foreign private, mostly foreign, private companies to act as a police force to go around bullying us and closing us down if we say something which engages Section 5 of the Public Order Act. It really is something that the government, I think, is going to regret. And I would very much like to hear what my noble friend has to say about that. Finally, if I may, and I do need just to move my tags in the bill, if I could come to my third group of amendments, these are 274, 278, 279 and 283. They're all related, they're all one topic. And these relate to... Lost it again. Oh dear, I had it. Will noble lords quietly talk amongst themselves? Page 145 is what I'm trying to find. Page 145. Yes, these relate to the text of the bill on page 145, clause 170. And here we're discussing what judgments providers have to make when they come to deciding what material to take down. Inevitably, they will have to make judgments. That's one of the unfortunate things about this bill, that a great deal of what we do in our lives is going to have to be based on judgments made by private companies, many of whom are based abroad, but which we're trying to legislate for. So it makes a certain sense that the law should say what they should take account of in making those judgments. But the guidance, or it's more than guidance, the mandate given to those companies by clause 170 is again very, very hair-trigger. So in section 5, which I'm proposing we amend, it says that in making such judgments, the approach to be followed is whether a provider has reasonable grounds to infer that content is of the kind in question. And I'm suggesting that that should be replaced with sufficient evidence to infer, so that they actually have to be able to produce some evidence that they are justified in taking content down. The test should be higher than simply having reasonable grounds, which may rest on a suspicion and little evidence at all. And so that is what one of those amendments relates to, strengthening that bar so that they have to have real evidence before they can take censorship actions. In section 6, I add only 2 words to it. Section 6 talks about reasonable grounds for the inference. It defines what reasonable grounds are, exist in relation to content and offence if, following the approach in subsection 2, etc., etc. I am saying if and only if. In other words, I'm making it clear that this is the only basis on which material can be censored using the provisions in this section, so as to limit it from going more widely. And the third one in the group is essentially consequential to that. So I think, my lords, we are all worried in this House about the prospect of speech being censored in a way which infringes the freedom of speech rights that we fought so hard to establish, and which are also embedded in Section 10, I think it is, of the European Convention on Human Rights. We want to have a legal structure which does not empower providers to act as private sector censors ranging over what we do, except in circumstances where it is wholly justified and in the public interest. The language in the bill is far too loose for this purpose. It doesn't give us the protection. It doesn't do what my noble friend said it would do when he spoke at second reading, and that is strike the right balance. These amendments in my third group, and indeed the one in the second group as well, are there to help strike the right balance, and I beg to move.
Page 7, line